Ever get the feeling like we're constantly being told what to think? Especially when it comes to the news,
Yeah.
It's like everyone's worried about the media and how much influence it has. Well, you're in the right place because we're diving right into that public opinion and the ways media plays a role. We've got excerpts from Natalia Arreguet's Opinion Publica ready to go.
Right.
We'll be unpacking Arreguet's insights and hopefully get you thinking a bit differently about how you interact with all the information thrown at us every day.
It's really easy to fall into that trap of thinking about media influence in such a simplistic way.
Right.
But, one of the things Arreguet really encourages is thinking about the nuances, like how we've moved away from that old hypodermic needle theory idea.
Oh.
Like we're all just sitting here waiting to be injected with opinions by the media. Exactly. It's like we're just passive receivers, blindly absorbing whatever's coming at us. And thankfully, as Arreguet points out, the research shows us it's just not that straightforward.
Okay, so if it's not as simple as see ad, change mind, what's the deal then? Arreguet talks about the limited effects paradigm. What's that all about?
Well, it's a perspective that acknowledges that media does have influence, but it's not this all-powerful force controlling our every thought, right?
Okay.
Arreguet highlights researchers like Lang and Lang who found it's less about direct control and more about subtle shaping.
So instead of a giant syringe, it's more like a gentle nudge.
That's a great way to put it, and that nudge is way more effective if you're already leaning that way.
Right.
Arreguet actually discusses Lazarsfeld's research in The People's Choice, which was, a game changer. Turns out when people were making decisions like who to vote for, their conversations with family and friends often mattered more than anything they saw in the media.
Oh, interesting. It's that whole idea of people trust people.
Right.
Not platforms so much.
Absolutely. Our existing beliefs, what we value, even just who we hang out with, those are all filters for how we process what we see in the media.
So we're not just empty vessels waiting to be filled up with whatever the media is putting out there.
Not at all. We all bring our own unique perspectives and experiences to the table, and those then interact with the information we encounter.
So it's not just passively absorbing messages.
Mm-hmm.
What is it then? How does media influence actually work, according to Arreguet?
Well, one theory Arreguet really dives into is this thing called cultivation theory, and it gets at this idea of subtle, long-term influence.
Cultivation theory. Sounds a little ominous. What's the main idea there?
Basically, it suggests that heavy media exposure, especially to fictional stuff, can actually cultivate perceptions of reality that line up with what we see on screen. Think about it. How much TV do you watch?
Let's just say I've seen every episode of Law & Order at least twice.
And have you ever, caught yourself thinking the world is way more dangerous than it probably is?
Right.
That's cultivation theory right there. It's not that those shows are lying or anything, but they present a certain version of reality, and with repeated exposure, it can seep into how we see things.
So it's not like watching one crime drama turns you into a paranoid mess or anything.
Right.
But those portrayals, they can add up over time.
Exactly. And Arreguet points out this applies to all sorts of things, not just violence. Think about how certain professions are portrayed, gender roles, even just what's considered normal in different social situations. The media we consume, it can subtly shape our expectations.
It's almost like a slow drip, drip, drip instead of a fire hose.
Yeah.
But over time, those drips can really make a difference.
And that brings us to another really interesting theory that Arreguet explores, agenda setting theory.
Okay, yeah, that one sounds especially relevant to this whole media telling us what to think about idea.
It really is. See, the media, it might not tell us exactly what to think, but as Arreguet explains, it has this huge influence on what we focus on, right?
Right.
The issues that get constant coverage, the ones everyone's debating on TV, those start to feel like the most important issues, even if they don't directly impact our daily lives.
Which makes sense, because if you're constantly seeing news about, some big political scandal,
right,
you might start to think that's way more important than, say, local environmental issues, even if those are going to affect you more directly.
Exactly. And Arreguet points out how this plays out in really subtle ways, too, just think about how different newspapers choose what stories to feature prominently, what to bury. It's all a way of saying this is what you should be paying attention to.
That actually reminds me of something I was reading recently about how social media algorithms can create these echo chambers where we only see stuff that already aligns with what we already believe.
That's a great connection to make, and it just highlights how important it is to, to be aware of those influences, to seek out diverse perspectives, and to really critically evaluate what we're seeing.
So we've talked about how media can subtly shape our view of reality and what we think is important. But what about the way information is presented to us? Aragat also gets into framing theory, doesn't she?
She does, and it's a really crucial piece of the puzzle. Think about it this way. You have a picture frame. It only shows you a specific portion of the scene, right?
Right. It focuses your attention on just one part of the picture.
Exactly, and that's what framing does with information. As Aragat explains, it's about emphasizing certain aspects of an issue while downplaying others, even if you're working with the same basic facts. It's almost like putting on different pairs of glasses and the world is the same, but you see it differently depending on the lens you're looking through.
So framing is like kind of sneaky then. It's not about making stuff up, right? It's more about choosing what to emphasize, what to leave out, to kind of nudge you in a certain direction.
It's subtle, but it's powerful. Aragat gives us a great example of like how the same protest can be described in totally different ways,
Right.
you know?
Okay, yeah.
One news outlet might focus on the peaceful demonstrators, their message, the number of people, and another outlet might zero in on a few scuffles, maybe some property damage, and call it a riot. Same event. Totally different feel.
And depending on which one you see, you might come away with like completely different views on the whole thing, even though they were both technically reporting on the same thing. It's kind of unsettling when you think about it.
Right. It really highlights why media literacy is so important, which Aragat talks about a lot. We can't just be passive consumers of information, you know. We have to be willing to dig a little deeper, question what we see, and try to understand those different perspectives.
Especially these days, when it seems like everyone's got an agenda and information spreads so fast.
Absolutely. And that's where all these theories that Aragat talks about, they all come together. The limited effects, cultivation, agenda setting, framing. Knowing about them gives us better tools to be more discerning, you know, to recognize how media might be influencing us, even subtly.
Yeah, it's like we've got this toolkit now for navigating this whole crazy information landscape.
Exactly.
And the more tools we have, the better.
It's not about becoming cynical or distrusting everything, right?
Right.
It's more about engaging with everything thoughtfully, recognizing that there are multiple sides to every story.
So where does this leave us? As we're scrolling through our feeds, flipping through channels, Aragat has given us a lot to think about.
She has, and I think maybe the most important takeaway is this. You're not just a passive recipient of information. You have a role to play in how you understand the world.
Well, I like that.
So like the next time you see a news story or a headline that makes you react, ask yourself, how is this being framed? What might be left out of this story? What other perspectives should I be considering?
That's a great point. It's empowering to remember that we have a choice in how we react. We're not just being swept along.
Exactly. We have the ability and I think the responsibility to be critical thinkers, to engage with the world in a thoughtful, informed way.
This deep dive has given us all a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us as we explored public opinion and the influence of media. Until next time.